Friends, family, comrades, welcome to the Belated Truth channel. We tell stories based on court documents about events happening right now. Today, we're revealing a chilling truth. This is not a movie or a novel, it's a real story happening around us. It's about money, justice, and, most of all, a group of ordinary people cruelly manipulated by fate, people caught in a massive cross-border whirlwind, becoming genuine financial refugees. Imagine this. After a lifetime of hard work and frugality, you've saved your hard-earned money hoping to secure a stable future for your family or a cushion for your retirement. But then, what happens? That money back home suddenly gets branded as a threat to national security and labeled illegal gains. Before you can even catch your breath, after risking everything to move that money across the ocean, thinking you've finally found a lawful safe harbor, you're told there that the money is fraud proceeds and will be completely confiscated. Isn't this the classic, between a rock and a hard place, getting hit from both sides with nowhere to turn? Your money is like prey by two massive beasts, no matter which way you run, you can't escape being devoured. This is the three-layer dilemma we're about to deeply analyze, a cruel trap that has bankrupted and shattered countless families. First trap, that national security cudgel back home that leaves you stuck. This story begins with an investor using the alias Tony. Tony, an ordinary Chinese citizen, like thousands of others, invested his savings in projects like judiciaries between 2020 and 2021. His simple intention was to preserve and grow his wealth through investment, to give his family a better life. He firmly believed this was just ordinary personal financial investment with no political ties or intentions to harm national security. But unexpectedly, a storm blew in. His investment was suddenly recharacterized by local authorities not just as a financial transaction but as funding activities that endanger national security, a grave accusation. It struck Tony like a thunderbolt. He had no political activities, no intentions, no ties to political groups, yet his money was forcibly labeled a national security threat. What a ridiculous accusation! Worse yet, authorities acted swiftly. 3 police officers burst into Tony's home and searched it. His passport was seized, along with his phone and computer. It was like a sudden disaster, stripping him of all freedom and privacy. He was taken to the Public Security Bureau for long interrogations focused on his G-Series investment and its connection to Mr. Guo Wengue. Under enormous pressure and facing a potential 5-year prison sentence, Tony was forced to sign a plea agreement. This agreement became an invisible shackle locking him in. Under local law, his assets instantly became illegal gains, subject to confiscation at any moment. It was hopeless. He was innocent but branded a criminal, his money turned into dirty money. When the police took him away, confiscated his passport, and placed that cold plea agreement before him, he felt not just fear but bone-deep despair. How could a simple citizen just trying to protect his hard-earned savings become a national security threat? This charge was a black hole swallowing all his hope and dignity. Signing meant his lifelong wealth would forever be labeled illegal gains, vulnerable to ruthless state seizure. This was more than money, it was an insult to his character and a denial of his life's value. Second trap, fleeing one hell only to fall into another. Facing political persecution and the constant risk of asset freezing back home, countless investors like Tony made a hard choice: move their money to the U.S. They saw America as a lifeline, believing it had sound laws that strictly protect private property. They invested in GTV, G/clubs, and the Himalaya Exchange, convinced these were normal personal investments securing their family's future. Little did they know, this was not a safe harbor but a much bigger pit. They were like ships struggling through a storm, barely escaping one raging sea only to be thrown into a more perilous whirlpool. Carrying this pain and their last flicker of faith in the rule of law, they trusted their remaining funds to the other side of the ocean, thinking America represented freedom and justice, but what awaited them was an even harsher trap. The U.S., once seen as a sanctuary, used a more covert and legal method to reap again. It's like escaping a fire only to fall into a deep ice cave. This double blow could crush anyone's spirit. Third trap, America's protective forfeiture leaves you with nothing. The cruelest irony, the same money branded a national security crime back home is declared proceeds of fraud by the U.S. Department of Justice and SEC. The U.S. government swears it's protecting victims, but their actions, freezing and confiscating all investors' assets, revealed the truth. Investors realized they had been deceived by not just one party or organization but by two national legal systems like two cold walls mercilessly squeezing them. Back home, they are criminals facing political persecution. In the US, they are victims protected to the point of ruin. It's absurd and heartbreaking. This caught between two fires situation plunges investors into unprecedented despair. Their money is eyed by two beasts. No matter where they flee, they cannot escape being devoured. This cruel reality is what we must understand. Tony's story is not unique. He represents thousands of financial refugees. Each once carried simple hopes for a better life and wealth preservation. Yet, caught in this state-driven legal meat grinder, their money, future, and families are ground to dust. This three-layer dilemma is more than economic loss, it's psychological trauma undermining faith in justice and hope for the future. It shows how fragile individual rights are against powerful state machinery. When law ceases to shield the weak and becomes a sickle harvesting wealth for the strong, where does society or the world head? Judicial weaponization, devils in legal disguise. What's even more infuriating, we recently obtained two key legal documents numbered 26-361 and 26-364. These documents, like sharp knives, tear apart the fancy facade of legal procedures, revealing the bloody truth inside judicial weaponization. What is judicial weaponization? Simply put, it's wielding law like a weapon not to pursue justice, but for hidden agendas. It's a demon cloaked in legal robes, ruthlessly devouring ordinary people's wealth and hope. Next, we'll delve deeper into how this judicial weaponization systematically strips these financial refugees of procedural justice. It's like an elaborate magic trick. The magician dazzles on stage, while the real secrets hide backstage in shadows. Invisible procedural walls, no way to seek justice. First, there's the procedural, invisible wall blocking all appeals. The documents reveal that the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York played a trick when handling these investor cases. For ordinary investors without lawyers, their painstakingly submitted legal filings were met with cold non-recording, no rulings, no recognition. Even though delivery receipts prove the court got the materials, the court's public electronic docket shows nothing. It's like mailing an important letter and having it disappear into thin air. Without records, no rulings, no appeals. This blocks the final path to justice. This no recording, no ruling, no recognition cold treatment is an unofficial policy carried out by the court clerk's office. It's not written down anywhere but acts like an invisible blade targeting ordinary investors without legal representation. Meanwhile, major law firms representing institutional clients have their filings properly recorded and promptly handled. This blatant double standard is naked arrogance of power. It tells us that in the justice system, whether your voice is heard depends on your financial ability to hire powerful lawyers. Isn't this a cruel mockery of equality before the law? The staggering $32 billion lie, a judicial feast. Next, let's talk about the astonishing $32 billion lie. This figure is more than just a number, it's a carefully woven trap, a smokescreen to legitimize mass asset forfeiture. Even more outrageously, the court appointed a special master and custodian named Luke, who, without any evidence or independent audit, declared a $32 billion claim a staggering, fabricated astronomical number. This figure is wildly inflated, intended to create the illusion of many victims and massive losses, thus providing a moral pretext for large-scale asset seizure. Yet when defendants requested to confront Luke in court to expose the falsehoods, the court refused, like a magician denying the audience a look behind the curtain. This deprives defendants and investors of the chance to reveal the truth, letting the enormous lie persist. Doesn't this tell us that in this trial, truth is irrelevant? What matters is making a lie appear true, dressing this legal robbery in the robes of justice? Even more appalling, custodian Luke has squandered nearly $38 million from the frozen investors' assets. These funds paid for exorbitant legal fees, travel expenses, and lavish administrative costs. This isn't protecting victims, it's a second plunder under the guise of protection. They're like vampires feasting on investors' flesh, treating investors' hard-earned money as their personal treasure. This behavior not only exploits investors economically but severely damages judicial credibility. It reveals the massive profit chains and ugly power rent-seeking lurking behind so-called justice. Loss of transparency, public barred from proceedings. Then there's the loss of transparency, excluding the public. The court even changed originally public hearings to in-person only at the last minute. This means distant investors or those unable to attend are ruthlessly shut out, unable to remotely access or hear court events or defend themselves. This practice seriously violates the U.S. First Amendment and common law rights to public judicial participation. It's like building an invisible wall around the courtroom, shutting out the public and shrouding everything in darkness. Without investor representatives present, Custodian Luke can freely declare unverified claims without fear of being challenged. Doesn't this show that public rights to know and participate are mercilessly stripped? This closed courtroom door blocks public access and enables under-the-table maneuvering. The deadly real name verification trap, caught between a rock and a hard place. Finally, the most insidious move, the real name verification death trap leaves you trapped. Prosecutors demand investors still in China submit detailed personal ID information to apply for compensation. This is pushing investors into the fire. Think about it, you've already been labeled a national security criminal and face possible imprisonment back home. Now the US government wants you to hand over your real identity, which is basically delivering a wanted list straight to the secret police. Investors face a lethal choice: accept a few $1,000s in compensation or protect their and their families' lives. It's a knife to the throat, forcing a choice. Knowing these investors risk political persecution, the U.S. justice system still insists on this, offering no anonymity protections. This amounts to blatant disregard for investors' basic human rights. By setting this insurmountable security barrier, the government effectively strips most real investors of their right to compensation. This cold, heartless approach tramples human rights and openly challenges international humanitarian principles. It reveals the chilling calculation hiding behind the rule of law cloak. Selective blindness in the evidence chain, truth suppressed. This trial has long surpassed an ordinary financial fraud case. It acts like a cold mirror reflecting how ordinary people are ruthlessly crushed by conflicting Chinese and U.S. legal systems. It reveals how procedural justice is so easily sacrificed when powerful state machinery clashes with tiny individual rights. When a justice system can systematically ignore 6,512 investors' voices and erase their existence by procedural means, how much weight does this justice really have? How much gold content remains in such a rule of law? Let's analyze how the government, in this billion-dollar scam case, builds its evidence chain through selective blindness. It's like a grand stage play where the director only allows certain actors on stage, only permits them certain lines, cutting out anyone not fitting the script. The government's charges involve thousands of investors, but do you know how many witnesses they summoned? Only a handful. Like a big war with just a few scouts claiming to know the full battle. Isn't this absurd? Using 5 to 6 witnesses to represent the will of 6,512 investors is logically unsound. It's like a doctor prescribing the same medicine to all patients after seeing just a few symptoms, a negligence that could kill. Worse, the government shows blatant selective blindness in choosing witnesses, only picking those claiming loss and systematically excluding the vast majority of investors who support defendants or deny being defrauded. It's a trial where the judge only hears the prosecution and ignores the defense. What justice is there in that? It tells us truth doesn't matter here, only how to construct a prosecution-friendly narrative through selective evidence to achieve preset political and economic aims. Blurred definition of criminal proceeds, lawful assets plundered. Next, consider the blurred definition of criminal proceeds. Under U.S. law, asset forfeiture must be based on proven criminal proceeds, that is, the government must prove every confiscated dollar directly relates to criminal activity. But in the G-Series case, the government uses a blanket forfeiture approach. Many investors' funds came from legitimate personal savings earned through lifelong hard work. These funds were fully lawful before entering G-Series. The government never individually proved every asset seized relates to alleged fraud. It's like a robber seeing money in your pocket and seizing it without asking if it's yours legally. This seriously violates innocent third parties' property rights, mixing lawful funds and so-called criminal proceeds into indiscriminate punishment. This isn't law, it's legalized robbery. It shows how naked plunder and injustice hide beneath the rule of law veneer. Legal precedent trampling, justice's guiding lights obscured. Let's take a closer look at how two key precedents, United States v. Miller and United States v. Rainford, were brutally trampled and twisted in this financial refugees tragedy. These cases serve as guiding lights for U.S. asset forfeiture law, but in this trial, their glow is deliberately dimmed. First, United States v. Miller, 2 DCIR 1993, sets a core lesson: you can't manufacture victims by force. The Second Circuit made clear that if alleged victims deny being defrauded, the government cannot forcibly deem their assets criminal proceeds for forfeiture. This precedent acts as a solid shield for innocent investors. It tells the government not to slap victim labels just to seize assets. Yet in G-Series, this shield is violently torn apart. Thousands of investors, via filings including 26-361 and 26-364, explicitly state, "I am not a fraud victim, my losses come from government seizure, not defendant's fraud." They speak out loudly, but the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York turns a deaf ear. This rejection of Miller's principle essentially manufactures victims to justify mass forfeiture under false legal pretenses. It's like a doctor falsely diagnosing healthy people to create patients, a desecration of legal spirit. It shows how easily judicial systems can abandon principles and integrity to achieve certain ends. Next, United States v. Rainford, 2 DCIR 2024, a recent 2024 Second Circuit ruling, reiterates that forfeiture must be based on proven assets directly linked to specific crimes. It demands the government present precise evidence proving each confiscated dollar's criminal nexus. This acts as a precise measuring tool, insisting on rigor. But in G-Series, the government uses the blanket forfeiture strategy again. They never proved every dollar of the $1.4 billion was fraudulent but lumped all assets into vague total claims. It's like an accountant reporting a huge number without checking the books, mocking legal rigor. Rainford demands strict evidence chains, yet here, the government hasn't even audited individual investor losses. It's like a math test where the student skips all calculations but writes an answer. How can anyone trust that? It reveals how judiciary, chasing speed or goals, sacrifices rigor and fairness. Motives behind judicial weaponization, power and profit games. Now let's expose deeper motives behind this judicial weaponization. It's more than twisted law, it's power corrupting justice. Like a giant gear silently grinding everything in its way. First, asset-driven law enforcement. The filings boldly question whether government zeal in big forfeitures hides unjust motives. Seized assets often flow into government forfeiture funds, possibly enticing enforcement to target big asset cases. It's like police not arresting criminals to uphold justice but to seize more loot to fill their own pockets. When law enforcement becomes a cash machine, where's legal dignity? Where's justice? Even worse, custodian Luke has squandered astonishing $38 million from seized investors' money. Using seized assets to pay exorbitant administrative costs forms a self-sustaining profit chain, an endless cash machine consistently withdrawing from investors' savings for personal waste. Doesn't this show law has become a tool for private enrichment? Behind justice lurk huge financial interests and ugly rent-seeking. Second, politicizing justice. With sensitive figures involved, judicial procedures are accused of serving political goals. It's political struggle cloaked in legal robes, turning law into a political weapon. When law is politically hijacked, it loses neutrality and becomes a political vassal. The U.S. judiciary's tacit alignment with home country accusations breaches judicial independence, causing global concern. Isn't this telling us law here has become a political toy? It's a heart-wrenching reality showing how, in international power plays, ordinary lives and rights are worthless, easily sacrificed. Profound impact on international rule of law, safe harbor collapsing. Lastly, let's discuss this trial's profound impact on international rule of law. This is more than a case ruling, it's a dangerous signal sounding a global alarm. If this can happen, investors worldwide will lose faith in international law. America was once the world's asset safe harbor, trusted by investors who believed here's where private property is protected by law. But in G-Series, that trust is mercilessly shattered. If a nation's judiciary can arbitrarily define victims and seize assets, private property security evaporates. It's like a harbor promising shelter but swallowing ships. The harbor's collapse will trigger a global trust crisis. It reveals that the so-called safe harbor is but a beautiful lie, a fragile illusion ready to shatter. Worsening cross-border legal conflicts. While the U.S. criticizes foreign judicial unfairness, its own procedural flaws handling complex multinational cases undermine its moral leadership and international rule of law. It's like a teacher accusing students of cheating while committing fraud in the exam. What right does such a teacher have to teach? Financial refugees find no escape from political and judicial dual plunder no matter where they flee. They're like birds trapped in a cage that no flight can break. This despair will erode global investor confidence in international law. It shows how ordinary people are mere pawns, their fate and rights tossed away in an instant under the chessboard of international politics. When a judicial system systematically silences 6,512 investors and erases them through procedure, how much weight does that justice hold? How much credibility does that rule of law have? We call on all who care about justice to pay attention. The injustice happening to these financial refugees today could happen to anyone tomorrow. We can't allow this injustice to spread, we must speak up. Truth may be delayed but must never be absent. We look forward to justice's light piercing through the fog and illuminating every corner. We hope those crushed and mercilessly ground will finally receive the fairness and justice they deserve. Please follow, like, and share. See you next time.